The bright fluorescent lights of Atlanta General Hospital cast long shadows down the busy hallway as Sarah Jenkins hurried to start her afternoon shift in the physical therapy department. At 32 years old, she had been working as a nurse for 8 years, but today felt different. There was a new patient on her schedule, Marcus Thompson, age 35, admitted after a severe car accident 3 months ago. Sarah checked her watch as she approached room 405. Her copper-brown skin glowed under the hospital lights as she adjusted her crisp white uniform and pulled her long braids into a neat bun. She always believed in making a good first impression with new patients. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," she called out cheerfully as she entered the room. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse during your physical therapy sessions." The man sitting in the wheelchair by the window turned to face her, and Sarah felt her breath catch slightly. Despite his condition, Marcus Thompson had the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. His warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners as he grinned at her. "Please call me Marcus," he said, wheeling himself closer. "Mr. Thompson makes me feel like my father." Sarah noticed how skillfully he managed his wheelchair, his strong arms controlling the movement with practiced ease. The accident had left him paralyzed from the waist down, but his upper body remained powerful and athletic. As she began checking his vital signs, they fell into easy conversation. Marcus told her about his job as a software engineer, which he could still do from home. "At least my brain and fingers still work perfectly," he joked, making Sarah laugh despite herself. "You seem to have a great attitude about everything," she observed, noting his blood pressure on his chart. Marcus's smile faded slightly. "Not always," he admitted. "The first month after the accident was the darkest time of my life. But then I realized I had two choices: give up or move forward. I chose to move forward." Over the next hour, Sarah helped Marcus with his exercises, supporting his legs as he worked to maintain muscle tone. She noticed how he never complained, even when she could see the strain on his face. "You know what I miss most?" he asked during a rest break, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Dancing. I used to love going out dancing on weekends." Sarah felt her heart squeeze with unexpected emotion. "Maybe you can find new ways to dance," she suggested. "I've seen some amazing wheelchair dancers on social media." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Really? I never thought about that. Would you show me some videos next time?" "Of course," Sarah replied, surprised by how eager she felt to share them with him. As their first session came to an end, Sarah found herself reluctant to leave. There was something special about Marcus, not just his handsome face or engaging smile, but his spirit. He radiated a kind of inner strength that drew her in. "Same time tomorrow?" Marcus asked as she prepared to leave. "Actually, I'm not scheduled for tomorrow," Sarah said, feeling oddly disappointed. "But I'll see you on Thursday." "Thursday it is," Marcus replied, giving her another one of his heartwarming smiles. "Thank you, Sarah. You made this much easier than I expected." As Sarah walked back to the nurse's station, her colleague Maria noticed her unusual expression. "New patient got you thinking?" she asked knowingly. Sarah shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. "He's just different," she said finally. "In a good way." "Girl, I saw the way you were looking at him," Maria teased. "But be careful, getting involved with patients is complicated." "It's not like that," Sarah protested, even as she felt her cheeks warm. "I'm just impressed by his attitude, that's all." But later that night, as she lay in bed in her small apartment, Sarah found herself thinking about Marcus's smile, about the strength in his voice when he talked about moving forward, about the way his eyes had lit up when she mentioned wheelchair dancing. She told herself it was just professional admiration for a patient's positive attitude. Deep down, though, Sarah knew something had shifted in her world that day. She just wasn't ready to admit what it was. Not yet. 3 weeks into Marcus's physical therapy, Sarah found herself looking forward to their sessions more than she wanted to admit. She had started bringing him videos of wheelchair dancers on her tablet, and they would spend their break time watching them together, with Marcus taking notes on his phone. One Thursday afternoon, as Sarah helped Marcus stretch his legs, he cleared his throat nervously. "Sarah, I've been thinking. Would you like to get coffee with me sometime? Outside the hospital, I mean." Sarah's hands froze on his leg. Her heart started beating faster, but her mind filled with doubts. Dating a patient wasn't exactly against hospital rules since she wasn't his primary care nurse, but it still felt complicated. I understand if you're not comfortable with it, Marcus added quickly, noticing her hesitation. I just really enjoy talking to you, and I'd like to get to know you better outside these white walls. Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. Don't forget Sunday dinner. Your sister has big news to share. I'd like that, Sarah found herself saying, surprising both Marcus and herself. Coffee, I mean. But let's wait until after your therapy cycle ends next week. That way, there's no conflict of interest. Marcus's face lit up with that smile that always made her heart skip a beat. It's a date, he said, then quickly added, I mean, if you want it to be. That Sunday, Sarah sat at her family's dinner table, pushing food around her plate as her younger sister Angela announced her engagement to a successful dentist. While everyone celebrated, Sarah's mother noticed her unusual quietness. After dinner, as Sarah helped with dishes, her mother cornered her in the kitchen. Baby, what's on your mind? You've been somewhere else all evening. Sarah took a deep breath. Mama, what would you say if I told you I might be interested in someone? That's wonderful, her mother exclaimed. Is he a doctor at the hospital, or maybe that new pastor at church? He's actually a patient. Well, almost a former patient, and he's in a wheelchair. The plate her mother was drying clattered onto the counter. A disabled man? Sarah Jenkins, have you lost your mind? You're a beautiful, educated woman. You need someone who can provide for you, give you children, take care of you. Mama, he's a successful software engineer. His brain works just fine, and his heart. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. His heart works better than most able-bodied men I've met. What will people say? Her mother demanded. What about your future? What about dancing at your wedding? Maybe we'll find new ways to dance, Sarah said quietly, thinking of the videos she and Marcus watched together. Later that week, on their first coffee date at a small cafe near the hospital, Sarah watched as Marcus skillfully maneuvered his wheelchair through the narrow space between tables. She noticed other customers staring, some with pity, others with curiosity. You get used to the stares, Marcus said, reading her thoughts. Though I admit, today they might be staring at how lucky I am to be with such a beautiful woman. Sarah blushed, then grew serious. Marcus, I need to be honest. My family, they might not understand this, whatever this is between us. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and strong against hers. My family wasn't sure at first either. They worried I was rushing into dating too soon after my accident. They worried I'd get hurt if someone wasn't interested in dealing with all this. He gestured at his wheelchair. And what did you tell them? Sarah asked softly. I told them that some things are worth the risk. His eyes met hers. Sarah, I know this won't be easy. I know there will be challenges and judgments and hard days. But I also know that in the past month, you've made me feel more alive than I've felt since my accident. You see me? Not just the wheelchair, but me. Sarah squeezed his hand, thinking about her mother's words, about the stairs, about all the obstacles ahead. Then she thought about Marcus's smile, his courage, his gentle heart. Some things are worth the risk, she repeated, and smiled as she saw the joy spread across his face. 6 months into their relationship, Sarah and Marcus had fallen into a comfortable routine. Every Friday evening, they would meet at Heritage Park, where they had their second date. Marcus liked how the smooth, paved paths made it easy for his wheelchair, and Sarah loved the peaceful atmosphere away from curious stares. On this particular Friday evening in October, Sarah noticed Marcus seemed nervous. He kept checking his phone and looking around as if waiting for something. Is everything okay? Sarah asked as they stopped near their favorite bench by the duck pond. The setting sun painted the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. Actually, Marcus said, his voice slightly shaky, I need to tell you something. He wheeled himself to face her directly. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. Sarah smiled, but before she could respond, soft music started playing from hidden speakers in the nearby trees. She recognized the song immediately. At Last by Etta James, the same song that had been playing in the cafe during their first date. What's going on? Sarah asked, her heart beginning to race. Marcus took her hand. When I had my accident, I thought my life was over. I thought no one would ever look at me the same way again, let alone love me." His eyes grew misty. "Then you walked into my hospital room with that beautiful smile, and everything changed." From behind nearby trees, people started emerging, their closest friends and family members. Sarah gasped as she saw her mother among them, standing next to Marcus's parents. Her mother had been slowly warming up to Marcus over the past months, impressed by his dedication to Sarah and his successful career. "I've been working with a jewelry designer for the past 3 months," Marcus continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I wanted to create something as special as you are." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a stunning ring. The design featured 2 intertwined bands, one silver, one gold, coming together to hold a beautiful diamond. "The different metals represent our different paths in life coming together to create something beautiful," he explained. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as tears began rolling down her cheeks. Marcus had clearly planned every detail, right down to having their families present. "The accident took away my ability to get down on one knee," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "but it couldn't take away my ability to love you completely. Sarah Jenkins, you see past my wheelchair to the man inside. You encourage me to be better, to try harder, to never give up. Will you marry me?" Sarah could barely speak through her tears. "Yes," she managed to whisper. "Yes, yes, yes." As she leaned down to kiss him, the gathered friends and family burst into applause. Sarah's mother was crying openly now, clutching Marcus's mother's hand. "I helped him pick out the design," Sarah's mother admitted later, hugging her daughter tight. "When he came to ask for my blessing, showing me sketches of rings and telling me all his plans, well, that's when I knew he was the right one for you, wheelchair or not." Marcus's father clapped him on the shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "Son, when you had that accident, we worried about your future. But looking at you now, with Sarah, you've shown us that love doesn't care about physical limitations." The park staff, who had helped Marcus set up the music and lights, brought out champagne and glasses. Marcus's younger sister Lisa had prepared a small cake which she said yes, written in elegant frosting. As their families celebrated around them, Sarah sat on the bench next to Marcus's wheelchair, admiring how the ring caught the light of the setting sun. "The jeweler said the 2 metals shouldn't work together," Marcus told her softly. "Just like some people said we shouldn't work together. But look how beautiful they are when they join." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling completely at peace. "Perfect things come in unexpected packages," she said, squeezing his hand. The music continued playing softly in the background as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Their families chatted and laughed together, all previous doubts forgotten in the joy of the moment. In that perfect evening, surrounded by love and acceptance, Sarah and Marcus knew they could face any challenge life threw at them together. The months following their engagement flew by in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Sarah and Marcus sat in their 5th wedding venue of the week, the Grand Palace Hotel, while the manager gave them a tour. Unlike the previous venues, this one had everything they needed: wide doorways, smooth floors, and most importantly, an elevator to the ballroom. "And here's our accessible bathroom," the manager said proudly, showing them a spacious, well-designed facility. Marcus exchanged a knowing look with Sarah. It was the first venue that hadn't awkwardly avoided mentioning accessibility features. Back at Sarah's apartment that evening, they spread out their wedding planning materials across her dining table. Marcus had created a detailed spreadsheet on his laptop, tracking every detail from the budget to the seating arrangements. "Who knew planning a wedding would be harder than my physical therapy?" Marcus joked, reviewing their guest list. They had decided on 150 guests, a mix of family, friends, and the medical staff who had become like family during Marcus's recovery. Sarah was about to respond when her phone rang. It was her mother. "Baby, I've been thinking about the wedding dress shopping next weekend," her mother said. "I called that boutique you liked, and—" she paused. "Well, they said their fitting rooms might be too small for Marcus's wheelchair if he wants to give his opinion." Sarah felt her heart sink. She had really wanted Marcus to be part of dress shopping, breaking tradition to include him in every aspect of their wedding. Before she could respond, Marcus wheeled over and gently took her free hand. "Put it on speaker," he whispered. When she did, he spoke up. "Mrs. Jenkins, what if we looked at some of those newer boutiques downtown? I've heard they're more modern and accessible." There was a pause on the other end. Then Sarah's mother surprised them both. Actually, I already called 3 of them. The one on Peachtree Street has a great setup. And they said lots of grooms come to help pick out dresses these days. Times are changing, I suppose. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Her mother had come so far from her initial reaction to their relationship. Now she was going out of her way to make sure Marcus could be included. The next challenge came when they met with the dance instructor. Sarah had been nervous about bringing up the first dance, but Marcus insisted on finding a way to make it special. "I've been watching those wheelchair dance videos you showed me," he told the instructor. "I think we can create something beautiful." The instructor, a former professional dancer named Carmen, didn't bat an eye. "Of course we can. I've choreographed wheelchair dances before. They can be even more elegant than traditional dances." For the next hour, Carmen showed them how Marcus could spin Sarah while she sat in his lap, how they could move in synchronized patterns across the floor, and how Sarah could twirl around his wheelchair in graceful circles. "See," Marcus said as they practiced, "we're already breaking stereotypes about disabled people not being able to dance." One evening, while reviewing their wedding plans, Marcus noticed Sarah looking worried. "What's on your mind, beautiful?" he asked. "I was just thinking about the ceremony," she admitted. "The church has stairs up to the altar." Marcus reached for her hand. "Sarah, we don't need to stand at an altar for our love to be blessed. We could have the ceremony in the church garden, under the sky, surrounded by flowers. Isn't that more romantic anyway?" Sarah leaned down to kiss him. "How do you always know how to make everything better?" Their wedding coordinator, Jessica, had been amazingly supportive, thinking of details they hadn't even considered. She arranged for rubber mats to cover the garden paths in case of rain, found a photographer who had experience shooting seated standing couples, and even suggested they rent a decorated wheelchair ramp for the garden ceremony. "Your wedding is going to be beautiful," Jessica assured them during their final planning meeting. "Not because of any special arrangements we're making, but because of the love between you two. That's what guests will remember." As Sarah and Marcus left the meeting, they felt confident about their choices. Yes, planning a wedding that accommodated Marcus's needs required extra thought and creativity. But just like their relationship, it was showing everyone that love knows no boundaries, and that different doesn't mean less beautiful. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun rise over Atlanta's skyline. In just a few hours, she would become Mrs. Sarah Thompson. Her wedding dress, a beautiful cream-colored gown with delicate lace details, hung by the door. "Baby, the makeup artist is here," her mother called from the living room of their hotel suite. Sarah took one last deep breath and turned away from the window, ready to begin the day she had been dreaming about. Across town in another hotel room, Marcus was already awake and sitting in his specially decorated wheelchair. His brother James had helped him attach small white flowers to the wheels, making it part of the wedding decor rather than trying to hide it. "Nervous?" James asked, adjusting Marcus's bow tie. "Not about marrying Sarah," Marcus replied with a smile, "just hoping everything runs smoothly." He checked his phone and found a message from Sarah. "Can't wait to be your wife." The church garden had been transformed into a magical space. White chairs lined a smooth, decorated pathway that would allow Marcus to wheel down the aisle easily. An arch of white and purple flowers stood at the front, with the morning sun creating a perfect natural spotlight. Guests began arriving, and Marcus noticed how their eyes widened with appreciation at the beautiful setup. There were no awkward stairs, no complicated arrangements, just a beautiful garden ready to witness a love story. Sarah's arrival was announced by the soft strings of "At Last," their song. Marcus turned his wheelchair toward the garden entrance and felt his breath catch. Sarah appeared at the beginning of the aisle, her dress flowing perfectly as she walked beside her father. She had chosen a dress that would look beautiful whether she was standing or sitting in Marcus's lap for their dance later. As she walked down the aisle, Sarah saw happy tears in many eyes, but none more touching than her mother's. The woman who had once opposed their relationship was now beaming with pride and joy. When Sarah reached the front, she immediately sat on the decorative bench that had been placed beside Marcus's wheelchair, making them the same height for the ceremony. It was a detail they had planned carefully, wanting to show that their love put them on equal ground. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, "we are gathered here today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate the power of love to overcome any obstacle, to break down any barrier, and to prove that God's love knows no limitations. During their vows, Marcus's voice was strong and clear. "Sarah, you saw me at my lowest point and helped me find strength I didn't know I had. You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier, only as part of who I am. I promise to love you, support you, and remind you every day that you made the right choice in loving me." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes before speaking her vows. "Marcus, you taught me that love doesn't follow society's rules. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, and that the biggest obstacles in life are the ones we create in our minds. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your biggest supporter for all our days." When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah leaned down to kiss Marcus, and the garden erupted in applause. Someone released white doves into the air, their wings catching the sunlight as they soared overhead. After the ceremony, as guests moved toward the reception area, Sarah's mother hugged them both. "I was wrong," she whispered to Marcus. "You are exactly what my daughter needed. You're what we all needed to understand that love is love." Marcus's father, who had been quietly watching everything, finally spoke up. "Son, when you had that accident, I thought your life was over. Today, I realize it was just beginning. You and Sarah have shown us all what real love looks like." As photographers captured their first moments as husband and wife, with the garden's flowers providing a perfect backdrop, Sarah sat in Marcus's lap, her dress arranged beautifully around them both. "Ready for our next adventure, Mrs. Thompson?" Marcus asked softly. Sarah kissed him again, not caring who was watching. "With you, always." The morning sun continued to shine down on them, a perfect blessing for their perfect day. They had shown everyone that true love doesn't see disabilities, only possibilities. The hotel ballroom sparkled with golden lights and purple flowers as guests moved in from the garden ceremony. Marcus and Sarah made their grand entrance to thunderous applause, with Sarah perched elegantly on Marcus's lap as he skillfully guided his wheelchair through the decorated doorway. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." The first surprise came during dinner. The medical staff from the physical therapy department, where their story began, had put together a video. The big screen lowered, and everyone watched as images of Marcus's recovery journey played, including the first day Sarah walked into his room. "We knew something was special from day one," Maria, Sarah's colleague, narrated in the video. "The way they looked at each other, it was like watching a real-life fairy tale begin." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand as they watched their love story unfold on screen. There were photos from their coffee dates, their park visits, and even screenshots of the wheelchair dance videos they used to watch together. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. And now, the DJ announced, for their first dance as husband and wife. The lights dimmed, and at last began playing again, but instead of just Marcus and Sarah moving to the center floor, 6 other couples in wheelchairs rolled out with them. They were all from Marcus's support group, and they had been secretly practicing for months. The crowd gasped as the couples began a perfectly choreographed wheelchair dance. Marcus spun Sarah on his lap while the other couples moved in synchronized patterns around them. The dance included moments where Sarah would stand and twirl, then gracefully return to Marcus's lap, their movements flowing together like water. "He planned this all himself," Sarah's mother whispered to another guest, wiping tears from her eyes. "Practiced every Tuesday night while telling Sarah he had support group meetings." When the dance ended, the ballroom erupted in applause and cheers. Many guests were crying, moved by the beautiful demonstration of how love adapts and finds its own way to dance. During dinner, Marcus's physical therapist, Dr. Johnson, clinked his glass for a toast. "When Marcus first came to us, he was determined to walk again," he said. "But what he found instead was something far more valuable. He found Sarah. And Sarah showed us all that sometimes the best path isn't learning to walk again, but learning to dance with the life you have." The evening continued with more surprises. The cake had been designed with a special mechanism allowing Marcus to join Sarah in cutting it together, their hands overlapping on the knife. The baker had incorporated their story into the design, with delicate wheelchair tracks in the frosting forming heart shapes. One of the most touching moments came when Sarah's father asked for everyone's attention. He walked to the center of the dance floor, emotional but composed. "When Sarah told me she was dating a man in a wheelchair, I had concerns," he admitted. "But Marcus taught me something important. He taught me that being a good man, a good husband, isn't about physical abilities. It's about the size of your heart and the strength of your character. And in those departments, my new son-in-law is the strongest man I know. Later in the evening, Marcus's support group friends returned to the dance floor, this time inviting other guests to join them. Soon the floor was filled with people, some in wheelchairs, some not, all dancing together without awkwardness or barriers. "Look what we started," Sarah said to Marcus, watching their families and friends celebrate together. "We did more than just get married today," Marcus replied, pulling her closer on his lap. "We showed people that love doesn't need legs to dance." As the evening went on, guests took turns signing a special guest book. Instead of just signatures, they were asked to write what they learned from Sarah and Marcus's love story. The pages filled with messages about breaking barriers, seeing beyond disabilities, and the true meaning of love. Near the end of the night, Maria caught the bouquet, and she immediately turned to wink at one of Marcus's friends from the support group who had participated in the wheelchair dance. "Well, would you look at that?" Sarah laughed. "Looks like we might have started a trend." Marcus grinned, watching their guests continue to dance and celebrate. "Maybe we did more than just plan a wedding," he said. "Maybe we helped change some minds about what love can look like." As the reception drew to a close, the wedding coordinator, Jessica, announced it was time for the newlyweds to open their gifts. Most guests had already left, leaving only close family members and a few intimate friends gathered around the gift table. "You didn't have to stay for this part," Sarah told her mother, who was carefully recording each gift in a notebook. "We could have done this tomorrow." "And miss the look on your face with each surprise?" "Not a chance, baby," her mother replied, already emotional from the beautiful reception. Marcus sat quietly in his wheelchair, watching Sarah open beautiful presents, crystal vases, expensive kitchen appliances, and elegant photo frames. But he kept checking his watch, seeming distracted. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked him softly. "Just waiting for one more thing," he answered mysteriously. Just then, Dr. Johnson, Marcus's primary physician from the hospital, walked into the ballroom carrying a large envelope. He wasn't originally supposed to be at the gift opening, and Sarah looked confused. "Sorry I'm late," Dr. Johnson said, nodding to Marcus. "The lad only just sent over the final results." Marcus took a deep breath. "Sarah, remember how I've been going to those extra physical therapy sessions on Thursday evenings?" Sarah nodded. She had assumed they were regular therapy sessions to help maintain his muscle tone, something he'd been doing since his accident. "Well," Marcus continued, his voice shaking slightly, "I haven't been completely honest with you." He saw Sarah's expression change and quickly added, not in a bad way, "I wanted this to be a surprise, the biggest surprise of all." Dr. Johnson handed the envelope to Marcus, who passed it to Sarah. "Open it," he whispered. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were medical documents, brain scans, and a series of photographs showing Marcus in what looked like a high-tech medical facility. For the past year, Marcus explained as Sarah read through the papers, "I've been part of an experimental medical trial at Atlanta Medical Research Center. They're testing a new type of neural implant that could help people with spinal cord injuries regain some sensation and movement in their legs." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she understood what she was reading. The documents showed test results, progress reports, and most importantly, success rates. "The implant was activated 3 months ago," Dr. Johnson explained, "and Marcus has been showing remarkable progress. He's been able to feel sensation in his toes and even achieve small movements in his ankles." But I never noticed," Sarah stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "That's because it's still very subtle," Marcus said softly. "I wanted to wait until we had concrete results before telling you. I didn't want to get your hopes up if it didn't work." Sarah's mother, who had been reading over her shoulder, gasped as she got to the last page. "There's a 60% chance of regaining partial leg movement within the next year?" Marcus nodded. "The results are promising, but there's still a long road ahead. More surgeries, more therapy, more treatments. I wanted you to know what you were really signing up for, Sarah. This journey might get harder before it gets easier." Sarah set down the papers and took Marcus's face in her hands. "You went through experimental surgery alone? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to marry me for who I am now, not for who I might become," Marcus replied, his eyes shining with tears. "I needed to know you'd love me even if this doesn't work." Dr. Johnson cleared his throat. "Marcus has been one of our most dedicated patients. Even on days when he was tired from the treatments, he never missed a single wedding planning meeting with you, Sarah." Sarah's father, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Son, you're already walking a path of courage, whether these treatments work or not." Through her tears, Sarah laughed. "So those extra therapy sessions were actually treatment sessions for the implant," Marcus finished. "I hated keeping it from you, but I wanted this moment, this surprise, to be perfect." Sarah leaned down and kissed him deeply, not caring who was watching. "You amazing, wonderful, crazy man," she whispered. "Did you really think this would change how I feel about you?" "No," Marcus smiled, wiping away her tears. "But I wanted you to know that our future might hold more possibilities than we imagined." As their families gathered around to look at the medical documents, Sarah kept hold of Marcus's hand, her new wedding ring glinting in the light. This wasn't just a wedding gift. It was the gift of hope, of possibilities, of new adventures to face together. 1 year after their magical wedding day, Sarah sat in the observation room of Atlanta Medical Research Center, watching through a glass window as Marcus worked with his physical therapy team. Her heart swelled with pride as she saw him, supported by parallel bars, taking small but determined steps. The experimental treatment had shown promising results over the past year, though the journey hadn't been easy. There had been 3 additional surgeries, countless therapy sessions, and some difficult days when progress seemed impossible. But through it all, their love had only grown stronger. "He's doing amazing today," Dr. Johnson said, joining Sarah at the window. "The neural implant is responding better than we expected. He can now feel sensation in both legs up to his knees." Sarah smiled, remembering the first time Marcus had excitedly called her at work, telling her he could feel the carpet under his toes. She had left her nursing shift early that day, rushing home to share in his joy. Inside the therapy room, Marcus looked up and waved at her, his face shining with sweat, but wearing that same determined smile she had fallen in love with. He was using a new type of walking frame, different from his wheelchair, though they still kept the decorated wedding wheelchair at home as a reminder of their special day. "Mrs. Thompson," a voice called from behind. Sarah turned to see Dr. Martinez, the lead researcher, holding a tablet. "We just analyzed Marcus's latest brain scans. The connection between the implant and his nervous system is getting stronger every week." Sarah's phone buzzed, a message from her mother asking about Sunday dinner. Ever since the wedding, their families had grown incredibly close. Every Sunday, they would gather at one of their homes, sharing meals and celebrating each small victory in Marcus's recovery journey. Last Sunday had been especially memorable. Marcus had managed to stand unassisted for almost 2 minutes, leading to a spontaneous celebration that had the whole family in tears of joy. Even Sarah's mother, who had once been so skeptical, now regularly bragged to her church friends about her miracle son-in-law. "Sarah," Marcus called out, gesturing for her to join him in the therapy room. As she entered, she could see he was exhausted but excited. "Watch this." Holding onto the parallel bars, Marcus slowly lifted his right leg and took a deliberate step forward. Then, with intense concentration, he moved his left leg. The movements were small and required immense effort, but they were real steps, something that had seemed impossible 2 years ago. "That's 5 more steps than yesterday," his therapist noted proudly, making marks on her clipboard. Sarah walked over and kissed him on the forehead, tasting the salt of his sweat. "You're amazing, you know that?" "We're amazing," Marcus corrected her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Later that evening, as they sat in their newly purchased accessible home, Sarah looked through their wedding album. The photos showed their wheelchair dance, their first kiss as husband and wife, and all the beautiful moments they had shared. "Do you ever regret not telling me about the treatment before the wedding?" Sarah asked, something she had wondered about occasionally. Marcus wheeled over to her. He still used his wheelchair most of the time, saving his energy for therapy sessions. "Never," he said firmly, "because now I know for certain that you married me for me, not for what I might become. Whether I end up walking again or not, I know our love is based on something deeper than physical abilities." Their doorbell rang. It was Maria from the hospital, delivering a homemade casserole. She had started dating Kevin, one of Marcus's friends from the support group who had participated in their wedding dance, and they were getting married next month. You two started quite a trend. Maria laughed, showing them her engagement ring. Kevin proposed just like Marcus did, in the park with music playing, though he added his own twist. He actually stood up for a few seconds using his new leg braces. As they invited Maria in for coffee, Sarah looked around their home at all the photographs on the walls. Their wedding day, Marcus's first day with the implant, their families together at Sunday dinners, and countless small moments of triumph and joy. You know what the best part of this past year has been? Marcus said later, as they got ready for bed, showing people that love isn't about walking or sitting, dancing or rolling. It's about two hearts beating in the same rhythm, no matter what path they take. Sarah leaned down to kiss him goodnight. And our hearts? She asked softly. Are just getting started, Marcus replied, pulling her close. This is just the beginning of our story.